I've never been the jealous type. Trust was something I gave freely, maybe too freely. My husband knew that about me. He knew I believed in him, completely. Maybe that's why he thought I'd never find out. It all started on a quiet Saturday morning. I was doing laundry, sorting through his clothes like I always did. I grabbed his favorite navy jacket, the one he always wore to work meetings. As I checked the pockets, something crumpled caught my attention. At first, I thought it was just an old receipt or maybe a forgotten to-do list. But when I pulled it out, my heart skipped a beat. It was a folded piece of paper, soft from being handled too many times. I recognized his handwriting immediately. My hand shook as I slowly unfolded it. The first line hit me like a punch to the stomach. I can't stop thinking about that night. You looked so beautiful sitting on my bed. I froze. For a split second, I told myself it had to be something from our early days. Maybe a letter he'd written for me, years ago, and just never thrown away. But as I kept reading, that small hope disappeared. He talked about the smell of her perfume. About how her laugh echoed in his head. About how dangerous it felt sneaking around, right under my nose. And then the line that made my chest ache. If only she knew, but she doesn't suspect a thing. She, meaning me. My vision blurred as tears threatened to fall. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, the letter clutched tightly in my hands. My mind raced through the past few weeks. The late nights. The unexplained work meetings. The strange, knowing glances between him and. My stomach turned. That night. The one he described. I had gone to bed early. I wasn't feeling well after dinner. And who had stayed up late with him downstairs? My sister. A wave of nausea hit me. I stood up, heart pounding, and started tearing through his drawers. The nightstands, the closet shelves, even the bottom of his gym bag. Nothing. No more letters. Not yet. His phone was next, but it was locked, same as always. Face ID. No chance. I was still standing in the bedroom, holding that single, awful letter, when I heard the front door open. He was home. Early. Hey babe? He called from downstairs. I shoved the letter under my pillow, trying to calm my breathing. Up here. I called back, forcing my voice to sound normal. He walked into the room with that same charming smile he always wore. Leaned in to kiss me like nothing was wrong. I let him. I had to. You okay? You seem off, he asked, narrowing his eyes. Just tired, I whispered. For the rest of the day, I played along. Laughed at his jokes. Sat beside him on the couch like the perfect wife. But inside, I was burning. That night, as he lay sleeping next to me, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My mind replayed every conversation with my sister. Every excuse she'd made. Every time she'd left early from family gatherings. I realized then, this wasn't just one mistake. This was a secret. A betrayal. A long, calculated lie. And by morning, I'd already decided. Tomorrow. I was going to search every corner of this house. Because I needed the full truth. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying the words from that first letter in my head, over and over, like a cruel song I couldn't turn off. By sunrise, I was already out of bed, pacing the house like a ghost. He was still asleep, completely unaware that I now carried this terrible truth. I waited for him to leave for work. Watched as he grabbed his coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out the door like he had no secrets. Like everything was fine. As soon as I heard his car pull away, I went straight to his home office. It was the one place I'd never really invaded. I always respected his space. Trusted that there was nothing to hide. But that trust was gone now. I started with the obvious, the top desk drawer. Pens, paper clips, and a few business cards. Nothing. I moved on to the next one. Files, tax papers, and old receipts. Still nothing. By the time I reached the bottom drawer, my hands were shaking. I pulled it open, and there it was. A small, wooden box pushed all the way to the back. My heart stopped. It had a simple lock, nothing fancy, but enough to make me pause. I rummaged through the kitchen drawer for a bobby pin and sat on the floor, working at the lock like my life depended on it. After what felt like forever, I heard the soft click. I opened the box, and there they were. At least 6 more letters. Some were old, with faded ink and worn edges. Others looked new, fresh, like he'd written them just days ago. I unfolded the first one, and the words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I miss you more than I should. Every time she talks about you, I want to scream. I felt my throat tighten. The second letter was worse. That night in the kitchen. I still feel your perfume on my clothes. I froze. The kitchen? I knew exactly which night he meant. My mother's birthday dinner. I'd been so busy preparing food, making sure everyone was taken care of, and they had been alone in the kitchen. The third letter shattered what little strength I had left. I hate hiding, but we have no choice, yet. Yet. That word haunted me. They were planning something. Planning to, what? Leave me? Continue sneaking around until I finally caught them? My hands trembled as I put the letters back inside the box. I couldn't risk him finding out that I knew. Not yet. I shoved the box under our bed, covering it with old blankets. I needed time. Time to think. To plan. Suddenly, I heard the front door open. My stomach dropped. He was home. Early again. I scrambled to my feet, wiped my face, and walked out to meet him in the hallway. Hey, babe, he said, smiling, dropping his bag near the door. Everything okay? Yeah, just cleaning, I replied, trying to sound casual. He kissed me on the forehead, like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't ignore the lump in my throat. That afternoon, after he left for work again, I grabbed one of the letters and drove straight to my sister's house. My hand shook as I rang her doorbell. She opened the door with that fake, innocent smile she always wore. Wow, what a surprise, she said. Without a word, I pulled the letter from my jacket and held it up in front of her face. Explain this. She froze. For a long moment, she didn't say a thing. Then she let out a slow, bitter laugh, looked me straight in the eye, and said words I'll never forget. You were never enough for him. The air left my lungs. I stumbled back, feeling the world spin around me. In that moment, I knew this wasn't over. I stood there on her doorstep, still holding the letter in my trembling hand. Her words kept echoing in my head. You were never enough for him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap her. I wanted to collapse onto the ground and cry until I couldn't breathe. But instead, I stood frozen, staring at her like I was seeing her for the first time. What did you just say? I whispered, my voice shaking. She didn't flinch. She crossed her arms over her chest and took a small step toward me, her eyes cold and unapologetic. You heard me, she said. You've never been enough for him. Not emotionally, not physically, not in any way. Her words cut deeper than any knife could. My throat tightened, and for a second, I thought I might throw up right there in front of her. "You're my sister," I finally said, my voice barely audible. "How could you do this to me?" She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Things happen," she said with a shrug. "You two were never really happy. Everyone could see it, except you." I felt my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You think that justifies this?" I snapped, holding up the letter in front of her face. "Lying to me? Sneaking around? Destroying my marriage?" She tilted her head, almost like she was bored. "Maybe if you'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have needed me," she said. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, completely speechless. My vision blurred with tears, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. Without another word, I turned and walked away. I got in my car, slammed the door, and just sat there for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I didn't know what to do next. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive somewhere far away and never come back. But deep down, I knew running wasn't an option. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When I got home, I went straight to our bedroom. I pulled out the box of letters from under the bed and laid them all out across the mattress. I read each one again, more carefully this time. Every word, every sentence, like a confession written just for me. And with each line, I felt my anger growing. I wasn't going to let them control the narrative anymore. I wasn't going to let them decide how the story ended. That's when the idea hit me. The family dinner. We had already planned it weeks ago. My mom was hosting, and everyone was invited, cousins, aunts, uncles, even close family friends. A perfect audience. A perfect stage. If they wanted to humiliate me behind closed doors, I would expose them in front of everyone. I grabbed an empty folder from my desk drawer. I carefully placed each letter inside, organizing them in chronological order. Then I labeled the folder with one simple word, truth. That night, when my husband came home, he greeted me with the same fake smile as always. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing the top of my head. "Busy," I replied, forcing a smile. "Busy planning your downfall." He had no idea what was coming. Neither of them did. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling like I had for so many nights before, I made myself a promise. At the family dinner, I would read every single word out loud. And this time, no one would be able to stop me. The night of the family dinner arrived faster than I expected. I had rehearsed everything in my head, what I'd say, how I'd look, where I'd stand. I wasn't just showing up with evidence. I was walking into a war. I wore a simple black dress. Clean. Controlled. Like I wanted my rage to look quiet, precise, impossible to ignore. The folder with the letters was in my bag. I had reread them so many times that I knew the wording by heart. Each sentence etched into my brain like scars. When I walked into my mother's house, everything looked normal. The table was set. Candles flickered. My mom was in the kitchen, laughing with my aunts. My cousins were pouring wine. No one knew that everything was about to break. Then they walked in. My husband, and my sister. Together. I watched them. How close they stood. How easily they smiled. How he whispered something in her ear and she laughed like it meant nothing. I almost lost it right there. But I smiled. Said hello like everything was fine. Sat down across from them. My hand stayed calm on my lap. My heart, though, was pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. Dinner began. Conversations flowed. My mom complimented the food. People talked about work, vacations, plans. I waited. I waited until everyone had a full plate, a full glass, a full sense of peace. Then I stood up. Before dessert, I said, tapping my glass gently, I'd like to share something with the family. The room quieted. Some people smiled politely. Others looked confused. My husband's fork froze midair. I pulled the folder from my bag. Opened it. Held the first letter in my hands. And I read. I can't stop thinking about that night. You looked so beautiful sitting on my bed. Gasps. Silence. My mother's hand covered her mouth. My cousin looked at her husband in shock. My aunt stared straight at my sister. I kept reading. If only she knew, but she doesn't suspect a thing. I looked up. Straight at them. They were frozen. Pale. My husband's mouth slightly open. My sister's eyes already filled with tears. I continued. Another letter. Then another. That night in the kitchen. I still feel your perfume on my clothes. Every head turned to them now. No one spoke. Then he stood. That's enough, he said, his voice shaking. Stop this now. He reached for the letter in my hand. And that's when my mother stood too. No, she said firmly. Let her finish. Everyone looked at her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She was calm. But her eyes were fire. My husband froze. I took a deep breath. These letters were written by my husband, to my sister. 4 months. Maybe longer. Someone in the room whispered, "Oh my God." I wasn't done. While I was cooking for this family, while I was smiling at birthdays and hugging people who lied to me, this was happening. I looked at my sister. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? She didn't answer. She just stood there. Her face streaked with tears. Silent. I turned to the rest of the room. I deserve better than this. I deserve honesty. I deserve loyalty. And tonight, I'm taking back my voice. No one clapped. No one spoke. It was better than applause. It was the sound of the truth sinking in. And in that silence, I knew. They'd never look at me the same way again. And I was finally okay with that. The moment my mother said it, the room froze. Let her finish. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. But the weight of her words landed like thunder. Everyone turned to look at her. My husband slowly lowered his hand, backing away from me like a child who had been caught. I held the letter in my hand, but I didn't read it yet. I looked at him. His face was flushed, his breathing uneven. The confidence he always wore like armor had completely vanished. I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but of the truth. You said you loved me, I told him, loud enough for everyone to hear. You stood in front of this family and made vows. While writing letters to her. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just silence. I turned to my sister. And you? You called me your best friend. Your sister. But all that time, you were waiting for me to break, weren't you? Tears streamed down her face. She didn't even try to deny it. And then I finally read the last letter. She suspects something now. I can tell. But it's okay. Soon, it won't matter. I'll find a way. I let the silence do its work. You could hear forks hitting plates. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "Unbelievable." Then my mother stepped forward. Her voice was low, but her words hit harder than mine ever could. You brought shame into this house. You disrespected your vows. And you, she looked at my sister, you betrayed your own blood. She looked at me next. Her eyes softer now. I don't care how this started. What matters is how you end it. I nodded. With slow, steady movements, I gathered all the letters and placed them back into the folder. I looked at everyone sitting around the table, my cousins, my aunts, people I grew up with, people who watched me fall apart without knowing why. This dinner was supposed to be a celebration. But for me, it's closure, I said. My husband took a step forward. Please, he said, voice cracking. Can we talk? Just the two of us? I stared at him. No. He blinked, stunned. We already did that, I said. And all I got were lies. He lowered his head. My sister turned away, ashamed. I turned to my mom. I'd like to stay here tonight, I said softly. She opened her arms and pulled me into a hug that broke the last piece of my silence. You always have a home here, she whispered. I grabbed my bag, folder still inside, and walked toward the door. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air felt cold but clean. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I drove in silence. No music. No distractions. Just the sound of the road and my own heartbeat finally slowing down. When I got to my mom's house, I took a hot shower, changed into an old hoodie, and sat on the edge of the guest bed. I pulled out the folder one last time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened it, took out each letter, and one by one, I tore them apart. Tiny pieces. All of them. Gone. Because this chapter of my life was over. And I was ready to start writing a new one. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you, you are not alone. Type broken heart in the comments if you made it to the end. And tell me, what would you have done at that dinner? Because this wasn't just a story, this was a warning.